Thank you for joining our webinar today. I'm Lauren Simpson with EMC's Core Technologies Marketing Team. I'd like to take a moment to go through a few quick housekeeping items before we get started. First of all, I'd like to stress that there is no dial-in required for the webinar. The audio is streamed automatically through your device. Also, it's very important for us to hear from you. So if you'd like to submit a question, please go ahead and click on the button on your screen. You can submit a question and we will attempt to answer some of them throughout the presentation, and if not, we will take some time at the end to respond. And just a note that today's session is being recorded. A copy will be available for replay shortly after the webinar ends, and you can see our Bright Talk channel as well as our emc.com page where you can locate all of our webinars. And at this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to our speakers, and I believe we have Mr. Peter Smales going first.
Yeah, how you doing, everybody? My name is Peter Smales. I'm Vice President of Product Marketing at EMC, and I'm joined by Matt Waxman, my partner in crime today, who's Vice President of Product Management. We're going to kind of double-click into two key areas, specifically around data domain cloud tier and EMC enterprise copy data management. But as always, with the world of data protection evolving as quickly as it is, it's always important to understand how these particular technologies fit into our overall technology strategy and how that presents itself as value to our customers. So as we walk through this, we're going to talk a little bit about EMC's overall strategy and how data protection is a core pillar of that strategy. We're going to talk to you a little bit about something called the Global Data Protection Index, which will put into very stark contrast for you the critical nature of data protection in your overall IT strategy. And then we'll talk more specifically about these products and how they fit into our overall technology strategy. So with that as a backdrop, I'm going to go from here and talk a little bit more about EMC's overall strategy. So if you're not familiar with EMC strategy, EMC is all about helping organizations transform, right? And transformation is really starts with business transformation. But in order to drive business transformation, you've got to be able to transform your underlying IT infrastructure. In order for you to be able to drive that underlying IT transformation, you've got to drive what we refer to as a modern data center. You've got to be able to have the underlying infrastructure that gives you the agility and the flexibility to be able to support all of your requirements across your overall infrastructure to support those overall business transformation initiatives. And so when we look at the modern data center strategy, it really comes down to 5 core pillars, and I'll briefly touch on each one of those. Flash, unless you have been hiding under a rock, you're very familiar with the fact that Flash is taken over the world. EMC has declared 2016 the year of all Flash, and this is really all about that inflection point between Flash media and spinning disk crossover from a price point and all of the inherent benefits associated with Flash in terms of performance, in terms of workload consolidation, in terms of footprint consolidation. So fundamentally, we see the world moving to a Flash-based data center. The second pillar of modern data center is all about scale out. And this is really about the fact that organizations don't start big necessarily. Organizations need to be able to start small. This isn't just about the largest of enterprises, but today's small businesses may be tomorrow's enterprises. So organizations are looking to be able to have a cost-effective entry point, a simple place to get started, but then have the technology capability to scale as you need to go. That's enabled by products that underlying have a scale-out architecture. So we see scale-out as an underlying pillar of the modern data center. The next bullet is around software-defined. With rapid commoditization of hardware and organizations, desire to continue to pull out as much cost from their infrastructure, organizations are looking to move to a software-defined data center. This is really about, agility. It's about being able to leverage commodity hardware, but it's also about, driving more flexibility and agility into your infrastructure by going to a more software-defined world. And then finally, no strategy would be complete without talking about cloud enablement. We see the cloud as a fundamental. It is not even an extension of your underlying infrastructure. It is foundational to your IT infrastructure. So by definition, any modern data center has to be cloud enabled. And then you've got that last pillar, which is really the focus of the conversation today. Everything we've just talked about is a complete waste of time and destined to fail if it's not packaged and wrapped in a layer of protection and trust. And ultimately what this means is it's about security and governance, it's specifically about data protection, and then it's about having the services and support so that organizations at any given time understand that all of their data, they have the right data in the right place, that all of their data is always available, and it's always protected no matter where it resides, no matter what happens. So that's why it actually surrounds the other four pillars. And again, the key message for everyone on today's call to take away is that data protection is a strategic pillar of EMC's overall modern data center strategy, which is why we spend so much time talking about it, because it is so critical to your overall IT transformation and business transformation. Let me put a finer point on that in terms of why it's so critical. So that's our view from a strategy standpoint. But let's put this in the context of the customer. This is the numbers you see on the screen are derived from a report called the Global Data Protection Index. This was a report that was sponsored by EMC, but it was a double-blind survey that was done to really understand from a market standpoint where customers were in their maturity around data protection. So it really was going out to understand what the landscape was. You know, how safe are we? How protected are organizations? How mature are they? And the thing that's important to take away from this slide, I won't drill into all of these in great detail, but a couple key points. One is 90%. So this was approximately 2,500 respondents globally across multiple market segments, across multiple company sizes. So this is a global index. It's not specific to any particular industry or segment. And from the survey, the respondents were put into four buckets. Whether they were, essentially you wanted to be leaders and adopters. So leaders were at the top, you had adopters, then you had evaluators, and you had laggards at the bottom. And what puts into stark contrast is this notion that 90% of respondents consider themselves to be laggards or evaluators, meaning they're not that mature in their data protection capabilities. What does that mean? It's more specifically things like close to 75% of the respondents don't feel that they're able to keep up with the pace of Flash. So Flash is outpacing their ability to keep up with protecting that data. That's a huge gap for them. Over 82% were unprepared for some of these future business challenges that we're talking about. So cloud, Flash-centric world, software-defined world, highly virtualized world. These are all challenges for organizations that are challenging their ability to protect their data. This is why it's so critical, and to put it finally in very stark contrast, the reality is that there are many organizations that are more mature, but despite the best efforts of everyone, the reality is that the respondents from this survey were still losing over 2 terabytes average data in a 12-month period, and that was costing them close to $1 million. So the important message here, it's not a statement about the state of technology or the state of solutions maturity in data protection. It's a statement about organizations' focus on leveraging data protection the way they need to so that they are completely prepared and completely protected. So the remainder of the conversation we're going to have is hopefully so far what you've taken away is data protection is important. It's really important. And if you don't want to lose data and you want to make sure you're prepared for the future, make sure that you have a completely holistic approach to how you're ensuring that your data is protected. That's the important message we want you to take away. And obviously we have a very strong strategy to help you do just that. So let's shift gears and talk about that for a little bit. So what are we doing about that? So that's the problem side of it. How does EMC help? Well, we have a unique strategy that we call data protection everywhere, and it's really simple to understand. EMC has always been and will always be a portfolio company, and so no one size fits all. So data protection everywhere is another manifestation of that. Data protection everywhere is all about delivering data protection wherever you need it, and however you want to leverage it, however you want to deploy it. So let me double click into that a little bit. So what does it mean when we talk about where you need it? Well, where you need it really means two things. One is, it's how are you consuming your data protection? How are you deploying your applications? What does your infrastructure look like? Are you a traditional on-prem data center? Have you moved to some degree or largely to a virtualized infrastructure? Are you taking advantage of the cloud? whether that's hybrid cloud, whether that's going all in on public cloud. Regardless of where you are in that evolution, you need to be protected. Because, and don't make the mistake of thinking you're protected in certain places. Regardless of where you are on that scale, you need to ensure you have protection. That's one piece of data protection everywhere. The second piece is also, it's not just about how you're consuming your infrastructure, it's also about value of data. So I think it's self-evident to anyone who's been in the IT business that not all data is created equal. So you have different SLAs that you need to meet from a protection standpoint, depending upon the value of the data and the mission criticality of that data. So data protection everywhere is also about delivering protection across the continuum of data protection. Everything from continuous availability for those continuous uptime applications, down through replication, through snaps, through backup, all the way back to the other side, the other end of the spectrum, around archive. So that's really the where you need it. The how you want it is also a matter of, back to the conversation we were just having around the pillars of the modern data center. Data protection also adheres to those pillars. So you may want, as a customer, you may choose that the best way for you to consume your data protection is just through best of breed portfolio. I want a la carte. I want to pick the pieces that I need. I'm off to the races. We've got you covered there. Many organizations are moving to more of a converged infrastructure because they want to leverage a different time to value. We've got solutions on that front as well. Many organizations, again, from a software-defined, are at least investigating or moving more aggressively to a software-defined world. We have data protection solutions on that front as well, and then you've got organizations that have gone all the way to the end of that spectrum, and they're looking at or are currently outsourcing what they're doing in terms of leveraging data protection as a service. The key message here is that all of these pieces are what, in aggregate, constitute data protection everywhere. It's a very unique strategy. It's different than what you may hear from other folks who will say that there's one product that can do everything and solve all your problems. And the reality from a market standpoint, and obviously EMC's philosophy on that one size does not fit all. The portfolio approach trumps the silver bullet, and hence our data protection everywhere strategy. So that's the backdrop of sort of the market conditions, where things are, the critical nature of data protection and EMC's overall strategy, and then more specifically what our data protection specific strategy is. So at this stage, what I'm going to do is we're going to shift gears. Make sure I have my slides correct here. I do. So I'm going to shift gears. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Waxman, who's going to spend some time talking through the particulars around two products. One is around Data Domain Cloud Tier, and the other is one around EMC's Enterprise Copy Data Management. The only thing I'd ask you to think about, because we'll come back and test you on this later, is that you'll see that these both take a very different approach to how we're solving problems for customers. And it speaks directly to the point that there is no one solution that's going to solve all your problems. So keep in mind sort of the breadth of what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of slides, and then we'll bring it all back together for you at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Matt.
Thanks, Pete. So Pete talked about the modern data center, and one of the key pillars to that was cloud enablement. And I think Pete summarized it really nicely, that it is a foundational element. It's not an either or. And as we talk to a lot of customers over the past couple of years, what's become clear is that when it comes to the cloud, it's not an either or. It's not rip and replace the infrastructure that you've got and make a wholesale move into the cloud. That's very disruptive for customers to do. So what we've created with the cloud tier on Data Domain is all about a seamless experience. And I equate this to the iPhone analogy. If many of you probably use iPhones or have this experience that you create an iCloud account and you've seamlessly backed up your pictures directly out of the camera app into iCloud, and you didn't have to do anything about it. And that's exactly what we've created around Data Domain Cloud Tier. So the notion is that as a customer, as your DBAs, as your app admins and backup admins and so forth, define a policy around the level of retention based on compliance, based on regulation and so forth, that there is a class of data that may be very well suited to be stored in a cloud object store. And that cloud object store is created directly out of Data Domain. This is a native experience, much like the iPhone. In Data Domain, you have the ability to set a policy as a user, and let the system manage efficiently moving that data out into an object store. Now, that object store can be on-prem with our products from EMC, like the Elastic Cloud Storage platform. It can be off-prem as well. So in VirtuStream, you'll be able to leverage the object storage service in VirtuStream as a target, as well as the third-party cloud providers like Amazon and Azure. Now, that being said, what makes Data Domain very unique in this scenario is the hallmark of Data Domain is the efficiency and performance of the platform, and doing that all through a very simplistic and secure infrastructure. All of those tenets of Data Domain hold in the cloud tier environment. So the efficiency of dedupe in Data Domain, 20-to-1, 30-to-1 dedupe ratios, you'll get that for your object storage. So the days of a penny per gig per month and thinking about the cost of object storage in those terms, now think about it with a 20x multiplier on top because of dedupe. The TCO is extremely attractive for this solution, and it's attractive whether you're on-prem or you're off-prem. And frankly, the product will be seamless and secure regardless of what you choose, on-prem or off-prem. Encryption follows through just like it does today, end-to-end through the device onto the at-rest data, and that will hold in the cloud. So rest assured that your data that you're sending for long-term retention purposes into the cloud will have the same level of encryption and the controls around that encryption that you do today and enjoy today on-prem. So a very exciting new frontier for Data Domain. This is just the beginning. So while we're not going to talk about much roadmap content here, what I can tell you is that long-term retention is a very important use case. Our customers and folks across the globe are looking to leverage Data Domain for, but there will be further innovations bringing Data Domain even more centric to a cloud environment. So stay tuned for those. And speaking of which, so we have several evolutions in Data Domain. Some of you hopefully have been following closely along with our journey over the past several years, but for those that haven't, Data Domain has evolved quite a bit. Data Domain has long stood as the best-of-breed solution in the purpose-built backup appliance as protection storage. And we continue to advance that technology, new hardware platforms, new software capabilities, so forth. That will absolutely be the underpinnings for Data Domain in the future. Pete earlier mentioned new deployment models around converged, software-defined, and as a service. And if you think of converged infrastructure, the simplicity of being able to deploy a solution as out-of-the-box, end-to-end integrated path is something that we can do today. Our data protection appliance that we released in the second quarter of this year gives you an integrated experience through a single SKU to be able to procure a Data Domain, size it, and have integrated backup software as part of that. So just like the primary storage space where converged infrastructure has brought storage, networking, and compute together, in the data protection space, we've brought secondary storage, protection storage together with backup software into a simplified offering, easier to deploy, shorter time to value. We've also evolved into the software-defined world. So our Data Domain Virtual Edition has been a fantastic new offering with literally thousands of customers across the globe that have now deployed it. And it takes the heart and soul of Data Domain, the file system, the deduplication, all the security and multi-tenancy capabilities, and packages those up in a software-defined world. So this is a solution that can be deployed on software-defined infrastructure, on commodity infrastructure, on hyper-converged infrastructure as well. So our VxRail solution has DDVE, the virtual edition, as part of that offering. So you can simply go to the VxRail marketplace and actually deploy a DDVE directly into your hyper-converged infrastructure and get very high efficiency, good performance as another layer of protection within a hyper-converged stack. And then lastly, as a service, we have a number of service providers, obviously, that are deploying Data Domain technology, but we're not stopping there. You can imagine a world in taking the Data Domain Virtual Edition and deploying that out into cloud infrastructures and leveraging Data Domain as a target for things like replication and DR. And so, data domain and protection storage have evolved quite a bit, and we continue to be the market leaders because of this level of innovation. So as we transition from protection storage into the rest of the modern protection storage and data protection landscape, Pete and I are going to walk you through the framework, if you will, to think about as you evolve from a traditional data protection environment into a data protection environment that has now taken the pillars of the modern data center into account. We want to help you walk through that journey. And so we're going to take you through that through a sequence of the traditional backup moving into the data management world.
Yeah, so I'll pick that up. This is Pete again. So, everything we've talked about so far, if you will, we're oversimplifying just a bit, but if you think about transformation, you think about evolution, it is, by definition, it's evolution, not revolution. Transformation is evolutionary. And so that the point is that where a lot of our focus is we have to ensure that all of our existing customers and today's customers, where they are today, are protected. At the same time, what you have to do is provide organizations with a very seamless migration path and sort of evolutionary path to the future. And this is another place where EMC is very uniquely differentiated because we have a very large portfolio of technologies and capabilities that are helping organizations today, but we have a very clear, crystal clear vision of where we're going, and most importantly, how organizations can non-disruptively disrupt themselves and evolve in the future. So what do I mean by that? Let me get specific. Well, a lot of what we've been talking about so far is what we would call in that bucket of traditional backup, primarily. We've touched on some evolutionary stuff already, but essentially your traditional world of backup software. In our case, you'd use Avum, or you'd use Network, or you'd use the Data Protection Suite. You've got agents, you've got servers, you've got some underlying infrastructure to support your data protection requirements. The foundation of all of that ultimately is protection storage. Data Domain is our flagship product from a protection storage standpoint. But what you've seen from us over the last 12 to 18 months, what we've seen from a marketplace and where we're leading the market and going is to much more of a self-service centric model. What is happening, and we'll talk quite a bit about this, what's happening is that the days of just the traditional, there's someone in a room somewhere whose job it is to just make sure all the backups get done and all the tapes get loaded and everybody can sleep at night and go home and relax on the weekends. Those days are long gone. There are still plenty of people that are doing that, but those same people are being tasked with, they've been hit with a much more complicated world, and a world where you have new personas, new data owners, line of business owners that want a whole lot more visibility and control over how their data gets protected. That is driving the world to much more of two things. One is it's going to much more of a self-service-centric model. But that also means that data protection is evolving rapidly away from sort of a traditional backup software-centric model to much more of an application-centric and infrastructure-centric model. Okay, we see that evolution happen. Again, this is an evolutionary step, not a revolutionary step. More people want more control and more visibility into what they're doing. So we have, if you're familiar with our portfolio, we do things like DD Boost, which provides direct integration with applications to be able to protect directly from those apps, to Data Domain, providing even more efficiency and performance than traditional backup. We introduced Protect Point last year, which is a product that provides storage integrated data protection. That's all about providing direct integration with the storage layer so you can back up directly from primary storage to protection storage at far greater speeds, far greater backup and restore performance rates. That's all about tighter integration with infrastructure. You may be familiar with our DD Boost for enterprise apps. That's an entire portfolio of app-centric capabilities, again, all about creating tighter integration between infrastructure and apps and protection storage. So we're well down that path, and we're uniquely positioned there. But the other piece of the puzzle that's happening with this evolution is that folks are also, as they move away from, as they evolve their traditional backup stuff, they're also moving to more of a copy-centric view of the world. So with that self-service comes a proliferation of underlying copies. And those copies, they can be important. So the answer, the problem to solve isn't just, oh, I don't want to have copies. Copies aren't a bad thing. Copies are a good thing as long as you have the appropriate governance and oversight of those copies. So ultimately, it really is about what copies am I creating, who's creating them, where are they being put. So from a strategy standpoint, where the world is going, from an evolution standpoint, is you'll see more and more folks moving or augmenting their traditional infrastructure with more of a copy-centric world. The key here is what you don't want to be focused on any technologies or capabilities that simply proliferate copies or don't provide that sort of global oversight and governance. That's a key pillar to put in the back of your minds. And ultimately, where you want to go once you've got that global oversight is you want to be able to actually take advantage of gaining knowledge and insight based upon the copies that you're creating. Who created them? When do they get created? What data resides in those? How many do I have? What can I do with them? So you can ultimately become more proactive and more intelligent about not just being reactive about protecting and making sure you're protected, but actually being proactive, being more efficient, and ensuring that you, A, are being very proactive about your overall protection strategy, but that fundamentally, as Matt said before, this evolution from sort of a data protection-centric mindset to more of protection as one pillar of an overall comprehensive data management strategy, that's the evolution. So it's ultimately about ensuring that you're always protected, but then being able to leverage and gain more insight from the underlying data that you are protecting. That's the bridge that takes you from a traditional data protection-centric view to a larger data management view where data protection plays a strategic part. And this is important for a couple different reasons. And I'm going to turn it back over to Matt because, as I mentioned, we want to double-click a little bit more into this notion of the personas, because ultimately what's driving this is the days of the quote-unquote backup admin being the only person that has their hands on data. That model is shifting, and it's a core tenet of our strategy to enable these additional personas. So let me turn it back over to Matt, who's going to talk to you more about this evolution of personas and what that means for data protection and data management.
Yeah, so this is a really important point. Pete talked a lot about the self-service notion, and that's absolutely a key trend that our customers are driving. But there needs to be some order to the chaos, and the chaos comes from the fact that at the same time that you're enabling self-service, if it's not got any centralized governance or oversight around it, it means that you now have not just backup admins that are creating copies, but VM admins and application admins and storage admins. And who at that point understands, are you creating the right number of copies? Are you actually protected in the right way? Are you overprotecting in certain environments, underprotecting in others? And so while you're trying to enable a new level of efficiency by driving decentralization away from the traditional backup admin, you're putting yourself at additional risk. And so the evolution of the personas here really speaks to our strategy around creating that copy oversight layer. And that copy oversight layer is unique in that it is not disruptive to deploy. It's something that we can layer into an environment that will give you visibility as an end user, as a customer, as potentially the person who's managing compliance and policy, into setting a standard and then getting visibility across how the various users are adhering to that. So it's not about going in and destroying copies. That's not the intent of our approach to this. It's about providing the right set of guardrails and insights to be able to more effectively and efficiently manage your business. And by doing that, we're going to reduce risk and we're going to improve compliance across the environment. So this is why it's so important that, as you look at our product offerings and our portfolio, that you look at the fact that we provide those capabilities to the DBA directly. Pete mentioned our integration with Boost. We've done that very successfully across all of the major applications. That is one of the fastest growing portions of our software business, is providing self-service through those agents. In the VM environments, going through vCenter, going through vRealize, going through vCloud Director for service providers, that's become the primary mechanism for a lot of those customers to be able to manage their environment. And then, of course, for the customers that want to deploy their own, build into native portals or service catalogs, having REST APIs across the set of capabilities here allow customers to build their own automation and orchestration on top of it. And so we're really catering not just to the different use cases from archive to backup to snapshots and availability, but also to the different consumers and the personas within them and how they want to interact with this stack.
And let me pick it up first, just for 1 second, Matt, before we double click into the product stuff. So let me put a finer point on everything Matt's saying from a customer problem standpoint. Similar to what we said earlier with the Global Data Protection Index. Don't take our word for this. The whole notion of copy data management is a real problem. And so what you're looking at here is data from IDC. And really the simple point here is, Matt hit the nail on the head. It is all about self-service. That's a mandate from organizations. They want a higher level of self-service to appease and placate all of the different data and application owners going forward. The practical reality of that is that there is a massive proliferation of copies. So the message from this slide to take away is that, one, it's a real problem. It's a tangible problem. And the simple message here is that if you look at sort of that production versus copies, simple message is that the vast majority of a lot of organizations' infrastructure is based upon copies versus just standard master production copies of data. Now, a very important point to take away from this, one is great. Organizations have lots of copies. But what's important to take away from this slide isn't that the answer is to get rid of all your copies. Copies aren't a bad, too many copies, copy sprawl is a bad thing. Copies unmanaged, are a bad thing. Copies managed is a good thing. Copies managed intelligently is a great thing. Copies managed intelligently that also give you additional insight to your overall data, protection and management infrastructure is unique to what EMC is doing. So that's where, we're really focused on, enabling you to tackle the sprawl problem by getting smarter about what you've got and where it belongs, and then gaining additional insight to that. So with that as the backdrop, I'll turn it back over to Matt, and we'll double-click specifically into our EMC Enterprise Copy Data Management offering.
Yeah, so when we started down this path about a year and a half ago, we had a number of customer conversations across the globe. And in every one of those, we asked the question, how many copies do you have in your infrastructure? And no one was able to answer that question, let alone do you have the right number of copies, to Pete's point about sprawl and so forth. So the premise of our solution here is first and foremost to give visibility, and give that visibility to customers in as non-disruptive a way as possible. So our Enterprise Copy Data Management solution is a software solution. It's something that you can download and deploy, very lightweight. It's not requiring a rip and replace of infrastructure in order to do it. And part of deploying this is a new paradigm around how you protect your environment. And it's got a very simple workflow here that's built around a service level. And as an end user, you're going to define your service level in terms of business relevant metrics, things like RPO and RTO. how many copies do you want to retain, and for how long, as opposed to managing individual backup jobs or individual snapshots or so forth. This is all built around the notion of an SLA. And that SLA is what the product itself actually goes and automates and enforces. So now imagine a world where you've got that policy put in place, and say you've got your users that want to spin up a copy for test and dev. Well, maybe that test and dev copy should only exist for 30 days, and after the 30 days it should be expired. That's the way that you're going to manage copy sprawl. It's not about, to Pete's point, reducing the number of copies. It's about putting the control around them. And so you don't have these dangling copies, as we would call them, that are just sitting out there that are potentially a security risk. They're consuming a lot of space and a lot of storage, and they're unmanaged. People don't even know what's actually in the environment. So the way that we're solving this problem is unique. And if we go to one step deeper, the product itself is again, very straightforward in how you can think about deploying it. The first step is all about discovery. That's key. That discovery is going to go out and identify the copies that have been created on your existing infrastructure. So we're talking about your Extreme IO, your VMAX all flash environments, your data domain environments, all the copies, there could be thousands of them that exist out there, we're going to bring into a central view. We've done, I think, a very novel approach to representing that in something we call the copy map. The copy map is a visualization that shows you the relationship between various copies. Think of it like a tree, where you see the very root of where you start your application, and then all the relevant copies connected into that. So instantly, when you log into this tool, you'll get a sense of, do you have copy sprawl? Do you have dangling copies that are out there? Does it make sense that you have copies that are in multiple places that may be serving the same purpose? So that's point one. Point two is around automation. That automation is going to be built around those SLAs. That automation will go deep into the actual creation of the copies themselves. So once you set that SLA and policy, the software will actually automate creating those snapshots. So if you wanted a snapshot on a nightly basis, and you wanted that to be created on your VMAX all flash array and then efficiently moved into data domain through a highly efficient transport layer, the software is going to automate all of that for you. And then the third step is around optimization. The optimization comes from, once you've got the insights and you've got the intelligence into the infrastructure, now you can start to look at, should I be putting these copies on these particular locations? Should I be moving them around? And so forth. And so you'll be able to now tune your environment based on having all of this information in one place. So it's an exciting new offering for us. This product will release very shortly, literally in the next month, and it will be available to our customer base. We encourage you to find out more through our various online resources, as well as through your EMC account rep.
All right, thank you, Matt. That kind of brings us around. Let's sort of do a quick recap here. We've covered a lot of ground, so I'm going to take a cut at trying to just recap, and then we can open it up for Q&A. So, you know, we covered a lot of ground. We covered two discrete but related different technologies, and I think the important messages that we'd like people to take away from the conversation really are, one, that, you know, data protection is a critical pillar of our strategy. The reason for that is based upon what we talked about with the Global Data Protection Index. If you're not already looking at having a holistic data protection strategy as part of your overall IT transformation, that's a miss, that's a gap, that's something that you definitely want to revisit, because the concerns are real and the concerns are quantifiable. So it's important, and it's in your best interest to be pursuing that. We have a unique strategy around data protection everywhere that's really all about providing protection across the continuum, across whatever consumption models you need. So effectively, protection wherever you need it, however you want it, to protect your data no matter what happens. And then additionally, you know, in the context of DD Cloud Tier, I think the simple message there is that, you know, two things. One is data domain in particular has has proven itself to be a real market leader, a true market leader in providing the most efficient protection storage available anywhere. And now with the addition of cloud tier, you've got the best of both worlds, which is leverage, the economies of scale from a cloud standpoint with, the legendary protection and performance, derived from data domain. And then shifting gears, on the enterprise copy data management, I think the important message is that if you're not already seeing the evolution towards self-service, you're likely going to see it, or you may just not be seeing it. It's not something actually to fight against. It's not something to push back on. It's actually something to embrace because it's actually a critical pillar of the evolution of where organizations need to go with data protection. And so, our guidance is, to embrace, that mentality, that self-service, embrace those new personas that are looking for that additional visibility and control, but do it in such a way that you maintain a degree of control and governance so that you strike the appropriate balance between oversight and autonomy. And so that you ultimately can have a win-win model for all of your business owners and database and application owners, as well as the folks from an IT standpoint that need to support all those folks. So again, interesting strategies, some fun technologies. Hopefully you've taken away some new or different insights that you didn't have before the call started. And at this point, that ends the formal presentation, so we can open it up for some Q&A.
So if anybody would like to enter in any questions, you can do so on the website, and you can just click on questions and submit your question. I'm going to go through 2 slides really quickly, and then we will start answering those questions. So first I want to take a moment and thank our presenters today, Matt and Pete. So really appreciate you taking the time to give us this awesome content. Also, I'd like to thank our viewers and everybody for joining us. Feel free to sign up for additional webinars on our Bright Talk channel, as well as our emc.com page. Also, the recording will be available right after the session concludes. And you can also stay social and get connected with us on multiple different routes or different ways. You can follow us on Twitter. We have the 3 different Twitter handles there. You can also like our Facebook page and follow us. Lots of great content always being pushed out through Facebook, as well as the core blog. And if you subscribe to the core blog, every time we have some new exciting information coming out, it will get submitted directly to you. So at this point, I would like to open it up for those questions. It looks like we have one in the queue.
Yeah, so we have one question around the data domain cloud tier and its relation to Avamar. So in an Avamar data domain environment, the cloud tier is a software capability added onto data domain. So you will be able to tier directly off of your data domain into the cloud, with Avamar providing the orchestration, if you will, on top of that. So just like you would set a retention policy within Avamar today, you would do that in this scenario with that data now going to cloud tier. Likewise with Networker, the same will hold true. So this is a capability of data domain itself, where the data movement is happening and orchestration can happen through backup software.
Perfect. Looks like we have one more question.
Yep, and I'll take this one. So we get this question frequently when we talk about EMC's enterprise copy data management solution, which we also refer to as eCDM. If you follow us on the primary storage side as well, you're probably familiar with a term and a solution we refer to as iCDM, which is Integrated Copy Data Management. We get questions about that, and really this question is about what's the relationship between iCDM and eCDM. Again, back to EMC's strategy of no one size fits all. There's no silver bullet. We're all in on the notion of copy data and copy sprawl being a challenge, but our approach to how we solve that problem is unique, and it's really about leveraging the right technologies in the right places. So the simple answer is that iCDM is all about, is really focused on workflow automation and application integration for primary arrays. So how can I automate and simplify the process of using and reusing copies within my primary arrays. So eCDM is about the efficient creation of primary copies. It's about the automation of that process through tight integration with applications. And then it's about super efficient creation of those copies for the purposes of reuse. So simply put, eCDM is really focused on primary storage, and its tenors are all about application integration and automation and efficient reuse of copies. Huge value in that. It's a key differentiator for EMC, and that's an inherent capability. That's the primary array's job, if you will, to do that, and our arrays happen to do that exceptionally well. Where eCDM fits is eCDM is really about bringing protection is really about two things. One is it's about bringing protection into that conversation so that you ensure that you have the protection storage within that same conversation. So it's about automation, it's about application integration, but its paradigm, if you will, is largely focused on bringing protection into that overall copy data story and strategy. And as we talked about, EMC has a very unique capability for tight application integration and exceptionally efficient protection storage. So the model holds exactly true that eCDM is the appropriate technology to create that tight correlation, bring protection into the story. But then the second piece of the enterprise copy data management story is all about giving you that global oversight. So to Matt's point earlier, at the end of the day, I can't manage things in silos. I've got to manage everything in aggregate. That's the smartest way to do it. So that's the second core tenet of eCDM, which is really about that global oversight of all of my copies, whether they are primary or protection. So simply put, eCDM, its job is focused on primary arrays. It's focused on that app integration and automation and efficient reuse of copies. Check. eCDM is focused on bringing protection into that story so that you've got protection as part of your overall copy data strategy. And secondly, providing that global oversight and compliance layer that sits above all of your copies to help you optimize and automate the management of all of your copies, primary and protection. So pretty simple to understand. Looks like we have a couple other questions.
Yeah, so I'll take these. So we've got a couple more questions around the data domain cloud tier and specifics around networker and code levels. So like I mentioned, data domain cloud tier will be fully supported by networker and Avamar. You will, at the release of the data domain cloud tier, have the ability to leverage your existing Avamar networker depending on code level, which we'll make available through our release notes, be able to leverage that updated version of data domain. There will be a new code level of data domain that will obviously deliver this capability, and that will be out shortly. For additional information on specific release levels, please work with your local teams, your account teams, and your SEs. They can give you the specifics on your environment and sizing and fit and so forth there.
Perfect. Good. So it looks like we've got to all the questions today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any additional questions, feel free to connect with us with one of those avenues that we posted up a little earlier. And with that, I think we'll conclude the session. So have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.